Well, wonderful. Welcome, everybody. I think we might have a few still joining us, but I think we can go ahead and get started. For those of you I don't know, I'm Kyle Yoder. I'm the Associate Research Director at the Center for Election Innovation and Research, and I'm pleased to welcome you all to this month's Books and Ballots. I'm going to cover the housekeeping and background, and my colleague, TJ Pichet at Ready for Tuesday, will moderate today's conversation in just a moment. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome. Books and Ballots first launched 2 years ago as a space where election professionals and researchers could share ideas, lessons learned, and practical insights from the field. And it's been incredibly rewarding to watch this community grow and continue the conversations that strengthen election administration across this country. As part of that growth, Books and Ballots has expanded in partnership and available resources. In addition to the webinar that you're joining today, which we do on a monthly basis, we now have resources available through Substack and as a podcast on Spotify. These efforts are a collaboration between Ready for Tuesday, the Center for Election Innovation and Research, and the MIT Election Data and Science Lab. Through it all, our goal remains to showcase the most useful research for election officials. As one final reminder for those who are joining us today, we're going to go through a series of moderated questions that TJ is going to lead, and then we'll turn the table to the audience and take questions from you all. So for everyone listening live, please feel free and encouraged to drop your questions using the Q&A feature. We're going to try to get to as many of those as we can before we run out of time. And with that, we've wrapped all the housekeeping, and I'll turn it over to my colleague, TJ.
All right. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you. Hi, everybody. A little bit of a housekeeping note for folks. I was previously affiliated with the elections group. I'm now affiliated with Ready for Tuesday, which is a new election support organization that is focusing on building capacity for election offices, building readiness, building resilience for election offices, but also the organizations that support them. I can't tell everybody how excited I am about this conversation. This is one that I've been wanting to do for a long time. Very excited to have Dr. Cameron Wimpy here with us today from Arkansas State University, Jennifer Clack, who's the election coordinator in Craighead County, Arkansas, and Sydney Romine, the elections director in Surry County, North Carolina. Before we get started, I would love beginning with Sydney, if you all could give us quick introductions and maybe tell us a little bit about the place where you're calling in from.
All right. I'm Sydney Romine. Like TJ said, I'm the election director for Surry County, North Carolina. I know a lot of you on this call probably don't know where that is, but it is the hometown of Andy Griffith, the Andy Griffith Show. We're a pretty small county. We have a little under 50,000 registered voters. So that's all. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you
Jennifer.
for having me.
I'm Jennifer Clack. I'm the election coordinator in Craighead County, Arkansas, which is also the county Dr. Wimpy's university, Arkansas State, is in. I've been doing this job for about 12 years. We're about the same size. We have about 55,000 voters, about 102,000 in the county that just live here. And so we got some rural and some, I wouldn't call us exactly urban, but a little more urban in our city, Jonesboro.
All right. Excellent. And Dr. Wimpy.
Yeah, so I'm Cameron Wimpy. I'm the chair of government law and policy and the director of the Institute for Rural Initiatives at Arkansas State University. And we're located in northeastern Arkansas.
All right. Very good. Well, I think we'll actually start with you, Cameron. I know you have your initiative at Arkansas State University that focuses a lot on the topic that we're discussing today. Can you tell us just generally about that work?
Sure. So the Institute for Rural Initiatives, we founded it in 2022 as sort of a state authorized institution on the campus here. And we do things outside of our conversation today. I'll just mention quickly, but cultural heritage sites, public policy, public health. We have a number of initiatives, economic development, and things like that. And we're uniquely situated somewhat in the Arkansas Delta, which is part of the broader Mississippi Delta, and we serve primarily a rural, student population, students from rural areas across Arkansas and sort of the neighboring states. But we're also a research university, and so we find it very important to incorporate some of who we are and where we are into the things we research. And my focus as a political scientist for the past several years has been primarily on election administration, as far as what I research substantively. And I think we're, for a variety of reasons, well situated to do that. We're in a rural area. As I said, we primarily serve a rural population, and it's a very important problem. We can set the stage just by saying, as you all, I think, have pointed out, there are 10,000 plus election jurisdictions in the country. So, not many voters live in those. We're talking about less than 1/5 of voters. But depending on how we classify things, 60% plus of elections are happening in rural areas. Somewhere between 75 and 97% of the country's landmass is considered rural. And so, put simply, 2/3 of elections in the U.S. are happening in rural areas. And we don't engage with that enough in our election science research, at least so far. There's been some work on that. What I'm consistently seeing is how important everyone finds it. But there's challenges to measurement, engaging with both election officials and voters in rural areas, all things we can get into today. But it's very exciting work, and I think very, very important work. And it's part of the gap we're looking to fill in the broader election administration space.
Excellent. I'm gonna turn to you, Jennifer, because
Okay.
you're calling in from the home of Arkansas State University. You're the poster child in many ways of Dr. Wimpy and his institute's efforts. What are you experiencing as an election administrator in a rural area? What are you seeing from the initiative that's helpful? What do you want to see more of? Like, just generally, go ahead.
Of course, I love all the connection I've made from this initiative with other people around the country and just locally here. I'm looking forward to some more research in getting this gap between rural and urban areas, because my Jonesboro area is pretty easy to, I have plenty of poll workers. I have, and luckily I have a lot of resources where a lot of counties do not. That's also another gap I'd like to see studied, because here in Craighead, I have plenty of budget to do what I need to do. Southern Arkansas, they're lucky if anybody gets paid at all that, doing their poll and trying to find poll workers, things like that. So I'd love to see how we can kind of fix that gap and get those people supported as much as us in more affluent areas. But most of my issues in the rural areas is just reaching them, like getting them out to vote. There's always a nice core that's voting, but how do you get the word out, and get in touch, see what they need, see what they want, how we can help them best is what I'm looking forward to the research that gets done and getting to talk to those people myself. So
that's amazing. All right, Sydney, Surrey County, Sydney. Congratulations to you on your new role.
Thank
I know
you.
you're relatively new to the director role after having served as deputy director. You are a veteran of election science reform and administration conferences. I think that's where you and I met several years ago. Can you tell me why an election official from rural North Carolina attends those types of convenings, the value that you get from those convenings, and similar to the question to Jennifer, kind of what more do you want to see from these types of efforts?
Okay, yeah, I've attended several of the Ezra conferences, like you mentioned. So I attended the first one with my election director at the time back in 2022. It was hosted at UNC Charlotte, which is only about an hour and a half from Surrey County here. So we went and really learned a lot. It's a very unique conference, unlike anything I've ever been to, because it brings together election experts from the academic side of things. So it's grad students, professors, and then also election experts that are local election administrators, so from the state level and the county level. And so it brings everybody together so you can collaborate on ideas and learn from each other, talk through things, and just really learn from the research that the academic side is doing, and also learn best practices as well. One of the biggest reasons I go, or I've been in the past couple years, is because we are a small county here in North Carolina, and North Carolina laws are, of course, different than in Arkansas or Texas or, wherever, but we all do still face some of the same challenges, whether it be, staffing or security, education for voters, that sort of thing. And also it's a really good way to gain, personal and professional connections as well that, you can call on and throw out ideas, see what, not having to reinvent the wheel, that sort of thing. So shameless plug for the Ezra conference. The next one is Arizona State, August 1st, or excuse me, June 1st through 4th. So if you haven't attended, I highly recommend it.
Cameron, that's the other ASU, right? That's the
Yes.
That's right. Yeah,
smaller
that's
one?
the lesser one. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Well, let's just all of you all have mentioned kind of some of those differences and differences in ability to staff. Jennifer, you mentioned that you live in a place where part of your county is somewhat urban, other parts of your county are very rural.
Yes.
Can we talk kind of just about the nuts and bolts when it comes down to setting things up, getting folks to participate, whatever part of the process? What are those big differences that you either see in your own county between your more urban and rural locations, or having conversations with your colleagues in other places? What makes you all different than those bigger cities
Right.
and bigger counties?
Right. Well, one of the things I'm struggling through right now is I have a lot of people retiring. They're in their 80s. They're like, we're done working a 12-hour day during elections. So I had that with some of my kind of more far-flung polling centers. So I'm not there in that city to get to know those people, and that's what I'm going to have to work on. I'm talking with those mayors, with people in that city to try to find new blood. And obviously, as Sydney probably also knows, we get a lot of retirees because they're the ones that can work all day. But what I've worked on is diversifying my polling staff so that I have young people, that a lot of times once they work once, they're hooked. They're going to take that vacation day and come work for me again and again and again. I'm also working with different companies in the area to get where they don't have to take a vacation day. It's actually included, like and they don't have to take that day. So we're still working on that. That's taking some convincing to some of our companies in the area. But it's just hard to reach those people to let them know, hey, we need people in this little town. Now I can send them Jonesboro people and pay for their mileage, but they don't like that. They want to know they want to know the people that are doing their polling place. So that's what I'm trying to do. I try to make my voters happy if I can. But the rural areas, it's just hard because you're not there all the time,
Yeah. So I was an election administrator, and I remember we had when I worked there, a polling location in a little tiny town called Island Grove.
Yeah.
And the poll official there, the clerk, she'd been doing it since maybe the beginning of time. I don't know. I wasn't there. But when she retired, you would have thought it was like Queen Elizabeth in England stepping down, because the people were just, who are they going to send? The person we ultimately sended, he said, I'd never been to this place. This is remarkable. And I guess she visited, and it was like the Queen had walked in. But anyway, Sydney, can you talk to us a little bit about Surry County and some of the complexities you face there?
I would say, yes, similar to what Jennifer said, we do have some precincts that we struggle to staff with precinct officials that do live, and we have to send, poll workers from neighboring precincts as well. Another thing is, the aging population of our voters, and especially our poll workers. The average age here for Surry County is probably 72 to 78 years old of our poll workers. So we're always trying to recruit poll workers, new poll workers, and especially younger poll workers that hopefully can work, several years. So one thing we do here in Surry County is we have student election assistants. So in North Carolina, students can help high school students as long as they are 17 years old. So we do recruit with the high schools and have have had success with that, but once again, you maybe only have them for a year or two, and then they go off to college. Some, go to community college here in Surrey County, and actually one of our chief judges from this past election, she started out as a student election assistant.
Nice.
She was in high school and now is a chief judge, so she's been serving for at least 6 years. So trying to build that, and then also I guess another maybe struggle that a smaller county would face where a bigger county wouldn't would just be staffing kind of shortage in general. So we have an amazing group of precinct officials in Surrey County, but people in elections know that during election time, that month to 2 months around election time, you're using them for everything, so they can be spread pretty thin. So even though we have great precinct officials, we're always trying to recruit more, and I think bigger counties have more people to pull from, and also some counties even use like staffing agencies, temp services, that sort of thing, where here in Surrey County and probably most rural counties, we don't do that. So I think that's some of the challenges that we face in smaller counties.
Cameron, you have the benefit of having, I think, a more comparative view than many of us when it comes to how election administration takes place in rural locations. Can you talk about some of the, I guess, more extreme examples that you've seen or written about in your research?
Sure. In a framework I've been developing is thinking about within more rural jurisdictions, places that are relatively high resource and high engagement versus those that are on the other end of that spectrum. And so I think in Jennifer and Sydney's case, we're talking about people who are definitely highly engaged and probably on the higher resource side because they have a larger, somewhat urban center in their jurisdictions. But you go to places that don't have that at all, and you hear an even more challenging story where they simply can't get enough workers to run the election properly, and they don't really know what to do. There's no one to turn to. There's no one to ask. And in some cases, I think they're worried to ask because it may bring scrutiny on them. Situations where they have no ability to reach out to voters at all through any sort of local news. There's no newspaper, there's no news that covers their area, no radio station that covers their area. And so resorting to social media posting to get the word out and using their own, Facebook page to do that because there's no sort of proper county method of going about doing something like that. And so those challenges, I think, are much more acute and severe, and there's not an easy road out of it because we're talking about both Jennifer and Sydney have alluded to aging populations in rural areas. People are aging at a faster rate. By 2040, it's expected that more than a quarter of people in rural areas are going to be over retirement age. And they're not being, replaced by younger people at the rate they are in urban areas. So we have in urban areas a much lower percentage. It's 10 to 15% of people who are above retirement age. And so, and we know the story there. Younger people are leaving for opportunities in the places where they are. So how do we continue to make things work in rural areas? Because many of the same boxes have to be checked. Whether you're running an election in a very tiny rural place versus a very large urban place. And so that challenge certainly exists. And so there's definitely a spectrum from where Jennifer and Sydney are to where I think things get even more challenging.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, let's jump on that. We talked about differences, right? And there obviously are differences and a spectrum of differences, to borrow the term. But what is the same? What are the stressors that, whether you're in Charlotte or Surrey, whether you're in Little Rock or Craighead, what are you faced with that you have to do kind of regardless of where you're at? Jennifer or Sydney, don't talk at once, but go ahead.
Well, of course, one big thing I have is misinformation. They're coming in thinking certain things about that they've just read, and someone may read a story about North Carolina and be like, well, why aren't we doing this? Like, well, that's a different state and we have different laws here. But anyway, misinformation's a big thing, and it's hard to fight that. I'm sure Sydney has this too, where everyone seems to think we're fixing our elections while we're here, working. And I'm like, I'm not going to federal prison for anyone. I don't know what y'all are thinking, but letting, just kind of communicating and being transparent and letting them, every time someone complains, I say, come work for me. come work, come see how it works. And so that's one of I think that probably urban people still have is just so much misinformation out there, and it's hard to combat that.
Sydney?
I would kind of second that. Misinformation, I think, goes hand in hand with voter education. So we try to do a good job with using our social media, our website, and getting out in the community to educate our voters. Because we are a smaller county, we don't have a local news station like on TV here in Surrey County. We get our news from Forsyth County or Guilford County, which is bigger counties pretty close by. So sometimes they have elections going on, like municipal elections, when we don't. And like you said, voters are watching the news, a little confused. Whenever they have municipal elections, our phones are ringing off the hook all day. I'm at my precinct today. Why is nobody here? So, trying to educate the voters, and also, I think along with that, just trying to be transparent as possible as
Yes.
well. And I think that's things that, whether you're a small county or a big county, those are priorities that we try to have and put in place here in Surrey County. We all of our meetings are open to the public in person, and we also live stream them and record them on our YouTube page. So that kind of goes along, I guess, with the voter education too. We try to have those out there so people have questions, they can see it for themselves, and hopefully that will prevent some of that misinformation and disinformation floating around out there.
Yeah, definitely.
What's something special about being an election administrator in a more rural place? What are the things that, I think everybody's got something about their job that keeps them going every day. Hopefully it goes beyond just the paycheck. But what do you love about administering elections in a more rural part of the United States?
I would say I love being in Surrey County because this is the county I grew up in. I've lived my whole life here except for moving away when I went to college and just starting out my career. And I came back home pretty quick. So I have deep ties to this county and this community and our voters. So I think that's why I'm passionate about this role and strive for excellence every day. We have two precinct officials I can think of off the top of my head that have worked for over 50 years in as a poll workers. Both of them, they're two different political parties. One's a Democrat, one's a Republican. They're from two different sides of the county, but they are passionate about our voters and serving them no matter their political parties, their backgrounds, but they're just there to serve our voters. So I think that is something unique in smaller counties, that we can have closer relationships with our voters and with our precinct officials or any stakeholders in elections. And I think that sometimes can help build trust in elections. I can't remember who it was at one of the election science conferences, the Ezra conferences, a session I sat in on, and it was talking about how people trust elections that are most close to them. So most people are going to trust their local elections. As it gets further away, if you're watching the news about, if you're in North Carolina and you're watching the news about Alaska, people have questions or might doubt, their elections more than their local ones. So I think that's something that's unique and I like about being in Surrey County and being in a small county.
Yeah, I do have people are like, well, I trust you, but I don't know if I trust all those other people. And I said, they're all the same as I am. They're doing their best and I promise you, no one is trying to get away with anything. We're just doing, the most we can to make sure all of you get to vote exactly the way you want to vote. And so, yeah, I love our people too. There's some I only see during early vote, while I'm helping up here. So I do love seeing all the people and sometimes they drive us crazy, but most of the time we love them.
It's like family, right?
It is.
Exactly.
It is.
Cameron,
Can I add one thing to that real quick?
Yes, please. I want to hear your perspective. What
yeah, so one is and they just hit on it, which is our research so far has suggested that this trust issue, certainly in rural areas, people are more trusting locally, and I think that's true of urban areas too, but they get less trusting the further away, we're talking about the way these questions are asked, and typically asked, your degree of confidence in the election. on surveys. But I think to their earlier point, when people are stopping by and asking questions and concerned about what's going on, it may also be easier for that to happen in rural areas because they also know where the place is, they know who the people are. So there's a sort of a double-edged problem there that exists. And obviously, I've never worked as an official in a local area, but I was during our primary election recently. I was out in some of the rural areas and really enjoyed watching officials interact with the people in their communities, and you can see how much enjoyment they got out of that. Seeing people, as Jennifer and Cindy said, that maybe you've grown up with or known for a long time, and even people would just randomly ask me, start talking to me as if I was someone who lived there and shared the same issues they do. Like a guy asked me if I knew anyone that had a good bush hog. While he was stopping by to vote, so I think that's an element again that is probably distinct from the more urban places.
Did you have anybody with a good bush hog?
I told him I did, but it'd be a couple hours to get it over there.
Well,
yeah.
All right,
Cameron, I'll have you come work some of my rural places. That's all good.
Yeah,
we're doing recruiting here. This is excellent. Sydney, it wouldn't break my heart to have to go to Surrey County, North Carolina.
Come on, but you can
Perfect. All right. I want to get a little bit more granular, and I think Jennifer, you mentioned early voting. Sydney, I know you guys have early voting in North Carolina. Just talking about some voting processes generally, and kind of an industry-wide shift toward perhaps more early voting, for example, right? I know that in rural areas, even if you're in a more, suburban or urban jurisdiction, in rural areas, some of those things don't necessarily work as nicely as they do in urban places. In the county where I live, we've got 5 early voting locations, probably within a 5-mile radius of one another. And then there's parts of our county where you got to travel 15 miles to get to the next closest early voting location. Thinking about vote by mail, the USPS is certainly not what it used to be in terms of kind of how quickly sometimes it's able to get mail to folks. How are you all facing some of these, not issues, but change is something that you got to deal with no matter where you are. How are you all dealing with it?
You
go ahead.
You go, Sydney. You go.
No, all you.
Okay. We're lucky. Jonesboro is kind of the center of our county, and we have the big hospital. We have all the doctors' office. We have the Walmart, and so we have a lot of people from those. They're coming into town anyway. We do have what we call like Western and Eastern districts. So we do have an early vote spot out there on the Eastern district. So all those people have a closer place to come vote. But I think, I'm very blessed here in Craighead. We have our own election building that's mine all year long. And so that's where everyone knows to come vote, and they'll come vote all through the 2 weeks of early vote. And we usually get about the same amount in early vote as we do all of election day. It usually mirrors each other. So we get a good chunk of people through here.
Sydney?
I would say here in Surrey County, and in North Carolina, early voting is continually being more popular as people's choice or method of voting. Here in Surrey County, we have 4 municipalities, and this past election, we had 4 early voting sites, 1 in each municipality. Mount Airy, which is, referring back to the Andy Griffith Show, Mayberry, that's our biggest municipality and most popular. That's where most people go to shop, go to eat, that sort of thing. So that's definitely our most popular early voting site. Actually, in this past primary, the March 3rd primary, on the first day of early voting, that site was the highest turnout in the whole state. So really popular early voting site. I would love to have another early voting site in Mount Airy, but unfortunately, we've looked at options, other buildings, but haven't really found another building to make a second early voting site in Mount Airy. So hopefully in the future we can find another one, but yeah, it continues to be really popular. Absentee by mail was a little down this past primary. We'll see going forward how that will be.
Yeah, let's talk briefly about You mentioned having difficulty finding an additional location. How creative, and Cameron, I'd love to hear from you too. How creative are you all having to be when it comes to finding not necessarily early voting locations, but election day precinct voting locations? What does that process look like for you? If the Baptist church calls and says, "Hey, we don't want to do this no more," is that something that, 5-alarm fire in the office, or how are you managing that?
One quick thing I'll say is that, at least I'm observing now, more and more counties in Arkansas are shifting to the vote center model. So they're having to come up with less locations. And I just shout out to our colleagues at University of Missouri St. Louis who have been studying this for a while now. But and obviously I think there's good things that come with vote centers, but there are also challenges. Jennifer mentioned that they're often coming to our town here in Jonesboro to do other business, and so they can perhaps stop by any one of the vote centers and make that work. But in places where there's not that sort of central location, it's a bit more challenging. And the county I mentioned I was in during our primary, I had several elderly people tell me that this is by far the furthest they'd ever had to drive, and they were fairly upset with the situation because they at one time could vote, much closer to home, and now they're driving.
Oh, was that my Black Oak that we closed down?
No, it wasn't. No, Jennifer wasn't here. It was a different county.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, I'm sure this could happen anywhere, but it's just like, so on one hand, vote centers, I think we love the idea. It eliminates this problem that TJ is talking about of having to find as many locations, et cetera. But we have to understand that in the rural counties, especially the ones that are larger, which the further west we get, many of them are, people are then having to drive a lot further. And it's making it much more challenging for them to get to the polls. So it's more convenient on one hand, but it's less convenient on the other. And some folks are going to gravitate, probably older folks, still toward voting on election day. But that was very frustrating for a number of voters there. But I don't know. The county simply couldn't run the election if they were still forced to have, 30 something precincts.
Oh, yeah.
Cameron, before Jennifer, Sydney jump in with an answer, did you tell them that you're sorry, but ask if they had a bush hog to borrow?
I did not. Yeah, I did tell them I was sorry and I understood the problem, but yeah, maybe I should offer the bush hog as a consequence.
There you go.
Yeah.
Jennifer, Sydney, anything on that kind of just the process of finding locations, whether that's any more difficult or easier?
I've not really had a problem. We have so many churches in our city and most of them are very happy to be our home for election days and things. As like I said, both early vote locations are county buildings, so that's easy. I'll never, that's just fine. But yeah, I'm very lucky to have everything pretty much established. I just hope none of my coworkers ever trash a place enough that they'll not want to be back again. But yeah, we've got plenty of churches here, and the university is helpful too. Like, we weren't able to go into the convocation center, so we're next door at the theater. It's pretty easy to tweak the locations.
Sydney, anything on this one?
Yeah, we don't have voting centers in North Carolina, but I think that is one of the reasons early voting is so popular. So the 4 early voting sites that we have sometimes all are funded by tax dollars, so county or municipally owned. We use a lot of churches, fire departments, rescue squads. We use a school, community buildings for election day precincts. So we are really lucky here in Surry County too to have a lot of those small community buildings or churches that allow us to use their facilities. And we always tell our precinct officials to leave things better than they found them. And we've had some great relationships with those facilities. And I think that goes back to being a rural community where a lot of people, you know people outside of work. So I am thankful for the facilities that we've had, or we do still have.
Amazing. Cameron, we've been talking for about half an hour. Anything you're hearing that's sparking ideas for future research, things that you're already working on, Where's your head?
So, something that always comes up that I guess I would love to work on, but I've yet to figure out a good path forward is solving this reaching the voter problem.
Yes.
And I, and as I mentioned earlier about the framework between say high and low resources, also sort of a framework that I'm thinking about with doing the research on rural election administration. One is asking questions that help us better understand the mind of the rural voter and their experience, what works for them, what doesn't, et cetera, high trust, low trust, all those things. The other is what we can do to actually affect things on the ground to impact administration. So, and make life easier for election administrators in rural areas. And that's, I think, more challenging for a variety of reasons. It obviously takes more resources, and things are worked differently in every state, as we just heard. So that is an ongoing challenge that I would, love someone to help me, figure out a way forward on. But those are also the most critical problems. So reaching the voters, poll worker recruitment. So part of that comes down to things like your organization does, TJ, and other organizations like it, which is developing materials to help certain types of jurisdictions solve some of their problems. So best practices, ways of doing outreach, explainers, things of that nature. So I think that's one way that we can collectively contribute. But that's again much more applied and a different sort of focus than say making something that is useful for an academic journal. So there's that distinction that has to be dealt with in any of this kind of work.
Anything there, Jennifer, Sydney, that comes to mind?
What we try to reach out to is, and everyone's got this same problem. Voters just don't think they matter. There are so many people are skipping out on voting because they don't think their vote matters. And I just, I want to get through to them that yes, I have had, had races that were decided by 10 people. Yes, everyone you have, and it just frustrates me because I don't want them to feel powerless. I want, that's their, you've got this power, don't give it up. Please come vote. That I would love to be able to get through to people for that.
That's excellent. Sydney, anything here?
I would say kind of going off of both what Cameron and Jennifer said, trying to reach the voters. Here in Surrey County, I don't know if it's, just Surrey County or because we're a smaller county or just the way our county's made up, but most of our voters are over probably the age of 60 that turn out. So we do try to reach all, different ages of voters, letting them know information. So we try to, really utilize our website. We do ads on radio stations, the local ones about, early voting, dates, times, hours, that sort of thing. We keep our social media up to date, trying to, reach some of the younger voters. And then we also, our local newspaper, do some ads there as well. And then we also try to give our candidates information. We found that to be pretty successful because, they're the ones trying to get people to come out to vote for them. So if we're giving them, whenever they come file, information with, the dates, the times, walls, that sort of thing, that they can put out to the voters as well, sometimes that can help. So using, I guess, different avenues to try to reach voters.
That's excellent. I'm going to go ahead and put some resources for folks in the chat, including how to learn more about Dr. Wimpy's research. Cameron, you mentioned some of our work, previous work at the elections group. I encourage folks to take a look at their resource library. The elections group is an excellent organization made up of former colleagues of mine, led by Jennifer Morell. They put out a bunch of kind of ready-made templates, guidance, those types of things for election officials. The folks at Ready for Tuesday, myself among them, will do similar work, focused again on capacity building, resilience, readiness, etc. I am going to turn us, though, to the Q&A because we have a pretty lively one here. So I am going to start with just a simple one, talking about ADA compliance.
Mhm.
What does the process of making sure that things are ADA compliant look like in Surrey and Craighead counties?
Go ahead, Sydney.
Okay, yeah, in North Carolina, all precincts and early voting sites do have to be ADA compliant. So in odd number years, we do go out to our facilities and do ADA surveys for each one. So we recently moved one precinct location to another. So before we could, officially our board vote on that and make that the precinct and push that out to the voters and notice that, we did have to do that survey. And for that precinct in particular, we did have to do a few updates to make that facility ADA compliant. And in each facility, we also have to have an ADA compliant voting machine as well. So yeah, definitely in North Carolina.
Yeah, went to every one of my polling places. We have a packet probably very similar to yours, and I measured every doorway and every hallway and made big packets with pictures and make sure. And we did actually close down 7 polling places at one point, 5 of those because there was no way to make them ADA compliant. I was in a wheelchair in my youth, and so I'm pretty good at spotting. There was a door I could barely open as an able-bodied adult. And I'm like, there's zero way I could have opened that door, if I had any kind of walking aid or mobile aid. So we actually did close down quite a few because there was no way to make them ADA compliant without a lot of money put in. But yeah, we keep, like you said, on odd years, we'll make a run through everything, make sure it's good. I have a couple places where we've gotten the little doorknob extenders, just some things, a couple of ramps we've gotten to make it a little easier in those places. But most of mine they're newer buildings. They're all very, very compliant and easy for our people to get to. So yeah, it's something we always keep. And I always tell my poll sheriffs to make a walk from the parking lot in and make sure there's nothing new in that path that might hinder somebody. So, yeah.
You said poll sheriffs? Is that like
We
the
have poll
over?
judges. We have poll
Okay,
judges and
awesome.
poll sheriffs. I don't get the sheriff thing, but it's
I like
what
it.
we got. So
I like it.
I do
thank
too.
you.
Poll chiefs, poll sheriffs, poll
Yeah, we
judges.
have chief
Uh-huh.
judges, so I
Man,
like poll sheriff.
Well, we have judges as well. So, and some people like the judge is more important than the sheriff, and in mine, the sheriff's the sheriff's the one in charge, and the judge is the assistant. It's just,
don't tell the judges.
I know, seriously.
Cameron, here's a question that I think is right up your alley. What are ways of measuring rurality that feel realistic to folks' lived experiences? This person mentions looking at citizen voting age population and rural urban continuum codes and trying to think through what might fit better when doing research. How do you determine what a rural location is versus what a non-rural location is?
It is a great question, and it's an ongoing discussion. And and just as an example, just yesterday I was on some emails with colleagues from UCSD and University of Maryland, talking about these very issues. And so it's true, most people tend to gravitate towards something that's administrative and already existing, like the rural urban continuum codes. There's also the rural urban commuting areas, and there's, I think, 17 definitions of rural across the federal government, and various agencies apply them differently. The census has just sort of a rural or actually a metro or not metro category. So it's very, very widely, I guess, across the government, it's applied very differently, is the right way to put it. And so the question there is, I think, in part related to what you're trying to solve. So are we talking about something that's administrative, something that actually varies at the county level, or something that relates to the voter's lived experience? And so the work that's been done so far suggests that the administrative measurements don't often align very well with asking someone, do you live in a rural area? Or do you identify as someone who lives in a rural area? Questions like that. They don't correlate that highly. Pew's done some work on that, and people are doing work now on that. And so obviously there's a gap there between what the administrative measures say and what someone's lived experience is. Part of the problem also is that, as Jennifer mentioned, here in our county, if you look at the rural urban continuum codes, we're categorized as a 3, which is towards the most urban end, which is a 1. But if you go, a few miles from here, it's going to feel very rural. And the lived experience in the small towns on the edge of our county are as rural as they are
Mhm.
anywhere in the U.S. So, below the county level, we don't have many great measurements. Outside of something like, again, the rural urban commuting areas, those are difficult to then, sort of work out because they're based on, the zip code tracks, which don't align nicely with the actual zip codes and all that. So it's a challenging question, and one that we're working on. Sort of what makes the most sense for election administration, and taking those two sides of the coin. Like, are we talking about the administration of the election in a county, and sort of what matters for that county in terms of resources and averaged out experience for administrators in that county, or are we talking about the individual voter and their perception of the world and how they see themselves? And I think those are different questions. So my short answer will be, I think you're in a safe space if you're using administrative data that already exists. It's easy to handle, easy to defend. It's methodologically verified, and sort of uh, something that is applied widely. But if you're talking about individuals, you might be better off to ask them and then rely on identity and sort of justify that based on someone's lived experience. Outside of that, it's something that everyone's working on, and I'm hoping in the next year or two we have some real breakthroughs on that. I will make a quick plug in a couple of years. We're going to host hopefully a fairly large conference here on how to measure rural, and we're going to do it across a variety of academic disciplines. So hopefully more is coming.
That's interesting. I grew up in a place where I would say we felt pretty rural because there were horses and cows and people showed pigs at the fair. But in 15 minutes you could be at Best Buy. So maybe there's something like, oh well, I don't know. Are we that rural? Let's go on to, here we go. For this one's for you, Jennifer. Have you found success encouraging folks who share misleading information joining as election workers or chiefs or judges or sheriffs?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, there's and I've noticed this among some of our government officials and the press. I'm like, come watch me work. If my little car is outside my annex, you can come see what I do. And they don't want to know. They just simply don't want to know.
No.
And I've had a couple, I have a couple that are now my poll workers, and they're like, oh, I tell everybody now that, oh no, this and that. So it's worked a tiny bit, but most people have fought me hard. I just had a discussion with one of our gentlemen who he writes a lot of letters to the editor, and has a lot of thoughts. And I said, come work, I'll show you. He's like, no. I was like, okay. So
Here we go. Here's a less a question, more a comment, but kind of Jeff Foxworthy-esque. You might be from a rural area if you know what a bush hog is.
yeah, exactly.
So there we go.
New measurement.
Excellent. The whole conference turned on its head. Here we go. Let's so this is for everybody. So how can local, county, state political parties and groups, or more politically affiliated groups, what's your relationship with them? Do they make your jobs easier? How could they make your jobs easier? What does that look like in your lived experience?
In North Carolina, so our judges and chief judges are recommended by the political parties. So that is one way that can make our job easier when they put forth names that are good precinct officials, and then they go to our board to officially be approved and then serve. So that's one way. And then just working with us, helping us get out correct information, that sort of thing.
Jennifer?
I love them and hate them at the same time. I've actually had a lot of support. We had, I won't give you the whole dramatic backstory, but we had a situation during the 22 primary, and I was being attacked a lot. And both parties came out and went, don't mess with our election coordinator, and they really did back me up, and it meant a lot to me. they both have leadership that are involved, that communicate with me, that trust me, I hope. I haven't heard if it's not, but yeah, the parties can definitely be a great help if you get those relationships
Excellent.
established.
Cameron, anything you see in?
Well, one quick thing I'll add, just to be brief in the interest of time, is that there are places that we've encountered, speaking directly to officials, where because the partisan imbalance is so high, they can't get the staffing balance they need again to sort of run their election based on statute. And so that's a challenge that exists. And the parties, at the state level aren't doing much to help folks in that situation.
Is that so? That's something that is not exclusive to rural areas. I mean, we talk to folks from suburban and
Yeah.
urban places where, maybe the parties that they're having difficulty recruiting from are different. But Jennifer, Sydney, is that something that you experience in your jurisdictions? And how do you try to overcome it?
Well, my parties don't do a whole lot. They suggest poll workers to me. Someone at a meeting might say, I want to work, and they'll forward that to me. But for my recruitment, most of the time, my parties are not involved. I did one year try to get everybody's party just so I could log it and let people know. And I would say 90% of them are like, I don't have an affiliation. I don't. And I believe them, so maybe I'm just an anomaly, but that's the first thing we talk about at poll training. We are neutral. We are Switzerland, and that's how it's going to stay. And everyone's on board. So,
Sydney?
I would say yes. Here in Surrey County, we do have a high population of one party, small population of another party, and then unaffiliated voters, so nonpartisan, is continually growing. And in North Carolina, you do have a chief judge, you have a Republican judge, and a Democrat judge at each precinct. So sometimes it is hard to fill those slots. So I do try to work with the parties to fill those. And sometimes if we can't find somebody of a party, we'll at least have one person in that precinct. We always have, bipartisan, but sometimes we will have to, fill that chief judge spot with an unaffiliated voter. But our board signs off on that, and sometimes even the parties do whenever they can't find somebody to fill those spots.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting challenge that kind of. Jennifer, I would say that in many cases you are the anomaly, because I hear from election officials across the country, I can't get enough so-and-so to sign up. So that's very interesting. Yeah. Let's keep going to here we go. I got another one. How do you transition voters' trust and their feelings of moving to vote centers? This person mentions that they did a consolidation in the fall and it was rough. I mentioned I'm from or what I considered to be a rural place. Change isn't something that we always handled very well. How do you work through that? What do those conversations look like?
Yeah, in 2018, when we transitioned to vote centers, I had a lot of people who were bristly about it. And I said, it doesn't mean you can't go to your polling center. You can go there if you want. But the choice is, if you came to Jonesboro that day, you could vote there. If you find yourself in the whole opposite corner of the county, you can vote there. And and it took them a good 4 years, but now they're just like, we're so glad this is like this. And they'll have to adjust, but they will, and they'll get enthusiastic about it eventually. I promise.
Sydney or Cameron?
We don't have vote centers in North Carolina.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
If you do, give me a call.
Okay, yeah, it sounds very convenient and similar to our early voting in a way.
Yes, it's exactly the same. Yeah.
I don't have a lot to say except what I said earlier about what challenges may exist and why that may cause issues for some folks. But I think Jennifer's right in helping them understand why you're doing it and how it benefits them is probably the key. But again, just a quick plug for our colleagues at the University of Missouri St. Louis who've been studying this very issue for a while, and maybe they might have more to say. And if someone wants to email me, I'm happy to put them in touch with them or whatever works best.
Excellent. All right. Go back to a nuts and bolts question before we close out. This person mentions that in their state, they have polling locations in areas that are so rural, there isn't cell phone reception. If and when you face this situation, what plans do you have for communication to and from the polling place? This person mentions, especially in cases of emergency, whether they be weather related or something like that. How do you deal with it? Do you deal with that? What does that look like?
In Surrey County, we try to, so we tell our poll workers as they're setting up the night before on election day to test their cell service, so to call us or text us. We do have a couple precincts that are kind of like this that don't have good cell reception. So we try to have Wi-Fi that they can actually text us, and that's what we normally, we kind of communicate with them by phone or by text throughout the day. And then we also work with our county emergency management department, and they actually provide us backup like radios. So in an emergency situation, we can hear that, so can emergency management, and it's just a good backup, even if it's not an emergency, but they need to contact us about, this voter showed up, we can't find them in our system, that sort of thing. So we kind of have, I guess, three different ways as backups.
Excellent. Jennifer?
Yeah, our check-in system, while it is goes up into the cloud, it can work without that. So at least my main problems is I have two churches that are metal buildings, so almost no signal gets in. So we put our Wi-Fi hotspot, at the front door. And I used to have one it's called Dixie, Arkansas. And it is the tiniest building you can imagine. And we did get cell phone boosters for them. But that was one of the ones I closed and eventually, but we're pretty lucky. But those cell phone boosters, are great. They really do work if you get a good one. So yeah, just like she said, preparedness before, go in there, test everything. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
the cell phone boosters, is that something that y'all install and it's there all the time, or it's
No,
something
they're
free just for-
temporary. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. I'll have to check
Yeah.
into that
Check
too.
into it. They're
Yeah,
they're not cheap, but
really.
I mean, they're not stupid. I mean, the really, really good ones that would handle many phones are pretty expensive. But I
Okay,
think ours
cool.
was 300 or 400. So
Definitely worth checking into. Thanks.
yeah.
We're learning from each other. Cameron?
Yes, that's what it's all about.
I'll quickly add that in another state, I heard of some folks buying, not, I don't want to name brands, but, satellite
Starlink.
Wi-Fi type equipment. And so to handle that problem where they could reach them on, either cell via Wi-Fi, or like Wi-Fi calling or FaceTime or what Zoom, what have you, as a way to get around that. But also, Sydney's point about radios, it's a,
That's a
it
good
seems like
idea.
an older technology, but it sure did work, and so in a lot of places, of course, a lot of places, if they're very mountainous or whatever, and they've gotten rid of their old repeaters, then that might not work. But nonetheless, I think having a plan in place and testing different types of devices is a good idea.
All right. Well, I'm going to turn it back to my colleague, Kyle Yoder, to carry us home. Thank you, folks, for this.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Folks in the audience, thank you so much for joining us today, but a big special round of applause for our panelists for such a great discussion. I think we all learned a lot. As somebody personally from Marion County, Indiana, which contains both Indianapolis and a whole heck of a lot of corn, I really did appreciate the conversation, and I'm sure I speak for everybody here. TJ dropped resources that were mentioned in today's discussion into the chat. Please do check out those links, and don't hesitate to reach out with any questions that we can answer here at Books and Ballots. We do plan to host one of these Books and Ballots webinars every month this year. April's focus is going to be on cybersecurity topics, so stay tuned for more information about the date and time for that conversation. And as always, our inbox is open if you have any additional questions. Please email us at support@readyfortuesday.com. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.